And so for many new listeners to Free Thought Radio, they don't know your story, which is really quite dramatic. And before we go to the Oprah Winfrey interview of you as a new atheist, you want to talk a little bit about what happened?
Well, I was a preacher. I was 19 years between my first and last sermons. I was an ordained minister. I was preached in 3 different California churches. I was a missionary to Mexico, cross-country evangelist, guest speaker, Christian songwriter. And after 4 or 5 years of reevaluating, I changed my mind. And in 1983, I realized I was an atheist. I didn't tell anybody for about 4 or 5 months, but
because it was your income in part, right?
Well, yeah, I know. How do you stop a lifetime of ministry? It was like, and I actually kept preaching for a while, which is kind of weird, but that I had to break it off in the December of '83. And
before you talk about that, though, talk a little bit about your family life. I mean, how religious your family was.
Oh yeah, as a child, yeah, we went to church all the time. My mom and dad were very devout, and Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening Bible study, and week-long revival meetings. And we went house to house, witnessing, preaching. We had Bible studies in our home, and we were really very happy and very strong believers. And we lived the Christian life. And then, of course, I made it my own. I became my own Christian. I accepted a call to the ministry I started preaching when I was a teenager. So, and I went all the way up into my early 30s as a preacher.
And you went to Azusa Pacific Christian College.
Yeah, and I got a degree in religion, studied some Greek, New Testament Greek, and but I was a soul winner, not a scholar. I wanted to be out in the streets because I thought Jesus was coming again any minute. I thought we got to bring one more soul into the kingdom.
So your crowd was pretty ultra fundamentalist, if that's what they were teaching.
We were fundamentalist, absolutistic, evangelical, born again, Bible believing, literal Word of God kind of people, and it was sort of a time of sort of happy, ignorant innocence. You know what I mean? We just thought, wow, we're soldiers in the front army for Jesus, and we're going to convert the world, like people are in some of these movements or these cults. And
then I
believed it. I really believed it.
And then what happened?
Well, as I was reading more and more and studying and looking at other points of view, and as I think I was growing up as well. And as my musicals were being performed around the
Christian
country,
musicals
and music, one of the songs was performed on Schuller's Hour of Power, Robert Schuller's Glass Cathedral. I started getting invitations to preach at different types of Christian churches, not just fundamentalists. And I started meeting more moderate believers, more evangelical, and my sermons changed from hellfire and brimstone into more of a love. How do you live your Christian life? Because Jesus kept on not coming again. I kept looking over my shoulder, and pretty soon my life was going on, and the world was not ending as we thought it was. As every generation of Christians think, the world's going to end any minute. And I in my early 30s, I just sort of started having this intellectual hunger, a starvation to learn more about what I was preaching. I read some science, popular science. I read some philosophy, and I was reading more of my faith to strengthen my faith. And then my views started to modulate. I started to gradually drift across the theological spectrum to where I became more of a moderate Christian. And then after a couple more years, one of those liberal Christians that I used to preach against. And finally, at the very end, in the middle of 1983, I dumped out all the bathwater and found out there's no baby there. And I was this like brand new, shivering, alone atheist. I didn't know if I knew there must have been other atheists in the world, but
you never met one that you knew of.
No, I guess I thought, and that's the way it is, I think, with most free thinkers. We come to it on our own. It wasn't like I joined some mass movement or something.
So before we go to this clip of you on the Oprah Winfrey Show, briefly to talk about the letter that you sent out in 1983 when you realized you were an atheist.
It was January of 84.
84.
84. I broke it off. I said, no more sermons. I sent this one-page letter out to everyone I could think of. Relatives, co-ministers, co-missionaries, Christian publishers, everyone I could think of, that my parents, just explaining that I no longer am a believer. I'm an atheist/agnostic, and that don't invite me to preach anymore. Or you can invite me if you want, but it'll be a totally different sermon.
And nobody ever did they?
No, well, I got involved in dialogue, and I got all sorts of reactions, from ugly, hateful, surprising reactions to some pretty nice, friendly reactions from people who I'm still friends with today.
And you were doing more reading, and that is when you contacted us, the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Because I read one of your books. I saw one of your books advertised in a magazine, and I wrote you a letter, and you never wrote me back. Your mom wrote back, though, and invited me to submit an article for the newspaper, Free Thought Today.
Which was very called Losing... I Just Lost Faith in Faith.
That was the first year of issue, wasn't it? In 84.
And so then I can say that the Oprah Winfrey interview came about because Oprah used to like us, and she invited us, my mother and I, to be on the show, and she also wanted former true believers who had become atheists because, of course, my mother and I were always non-religious. We were raised without religion. And so we thought of you. You were out in California, and so they flew you out to the show, and that's where we had never met you before. There was some suspense. And let's listen to a clip of the very first interview Dan ever did as an atheist. It was on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
And it's the day that you and I met each other also on this show.
Joining me now is a former ordained minister of 17 years who gave up his religion, Dan Barker. So, tell me your story, Dan.
I was one of those
The ex-reverend, right? The ex-reverend.
The ex-reverend.
Yes.
I was one of those guys that would walk up to you on the street and tell you about Jesus Christ and would convince you to say the sinner's prayer, would convince you that you were a sinner deserving of damnation, tell you about Jesus' love, read the Bible to you, and pray with people like yourself, with many people. I was an evangelist, and I loved the gospel, the calling of the ministry, and I've changed my mind.
What made you change your mind, Dan?
In 30 years of going to church and being a preacher, I never got to sleep in on Sunday mornings.
Was that the reason?
Chance? No.
Well, Dan, for goodness sake, sleep in on Saturday. But what is the real reason? When you woke up one morning and you said what?
No, for me it was a 5-year struggle. I was always in love with reason and intelligence and truth. I thought Christianity had the truth. I really believed it. I dedicated my life.
When did you become a Christian? When you were a little boy?
I was raised in the church, but at the age of 15, I dedicated my life to Jesus Christ. I accepted the calling of God in my life to be a minister, to be an evangelist. And at that age, I went out and started sharing. I went to Mexico, the mountains and the jungles of Mexico, to share my faith for years. Traveled the U.S., standing in parks and street corners and telling people about Jesus' love. Well, a 15-year-old evangelist, 16, 17, through all
I know, I
this.
did in the 3rd grade. I understand.
And I haven't really changed. I'm still searching for intelligence and reason and values, and I still love truth. I'm still the same person, the same minister who wants to know what is real and what is true. And I've decided that the evidences for Christianity are not solid evidences. The Bible is an unreliable document, and it is a very uninspiring document, and my heart cannot accept what my mind rejects after serious study.
And so you have decided what? There is no God?
Well, I am an atheist now, yes. I do not personally hold a belief in God, which is the definition.
You went from 17 years of being a minister to not believing in God.
Right.
What does that say about you?
That means I was wrong. I made a mistake. I had a psychological delusion.
That was Dan being interviewed by Oprah Winfrey.
That was kind of scary. That was my first time to publicly be an atheist in front of a TV audience as well. So, and those feelings were very raw at that time, you can tell.
You used to call yourself a baby atheist. And then you went on and a few years later wrote a book. What was that called? Losing
Faith in Faith, From Preacher to Atheist, where I spell out in greater depth than what I could say on that one show.
And that is available in print from ffrf.org. It's been a big seller since it came out in 94. And
92.
92.
Yeah.
Excuse me, how time flies. And since you were a Christian songwriter, you naturally enough became a free thought songwriter when you lost your faith. And what's this refrain we're going to hear?
Life is good. It's mocking the gospel, but it's a new gospel that there's a hope in a higher power in our mind. Giving up religion actually makes life much better.
And as Tom Reed was saying, how he more and more embraces the natural world.
Exactly.
Life is good.